Okay, so let's talk about critical path on the PMP exam. Okay, so how does this actually work? Well, even though in the real world, typically the tool that you use, the scheduling tool, will do all the calculating that you need for early start and early finish and your float and what the critical path is. For the exam, you need to know how to calculate it. So here's how it's going to work: is you're going to get a table, and that table looks something like this. It'll say like, here are the activities. So I've got them as letters. Activity A has a duration of 6. There's no predecessor to it, and there's no lag. Now, on the exam, you may not get the lag column, but I want to show you how that works just in case you do. And then we've got activity B, C, D, and E. So we've got this table, and so you'll be given the table, and then you'll be asked a question based on that information. And the question could be something like, what is the path of the critical path? How many paths are there? What is the float of activity C? It could be a number of different questions like that. But the key to these sort of questions is to be able to draw a good network diagram. And so before you take the exam, I just want you to practice getting used to do that. In fact, I want to show you the technique that I teach my exam prep students. And let's actually see how that works. So when you get into the testing center, you'll be given a exam booklet, which think of that as your scratch paper. And so when you come across the question, what you're going to do is you're going to draw your network diagram out. And so I've got activity A. It's a duration of 6. Okay, so just draw a rectangle. I'm going to say it's A. Now, as I'm going to teach it, I put the duration right here. That's how I learned it. Some people put it up top. PMI doesn't prescribe that it has to be done a certain way, but I'm going to put my duration right there. All right, so I've got an activity A, a duration of 6. There's no lag. B is the predecessor's A, so I very unimaginatively call this technique straight lines and right angles. So B comes after A, so just a straight line, B, and my duration for that is 11. And then C, the predecessor is A. All right, so it's not after B, so I just call it straight lines, right angles. I put C down here. My duration is 7, straight line, right angle. Okay? Now you might think it's being picky about the whole straight line, right angle, but here's the deal. If you can draw a reasonably straightforward network diagram, these questions are a lot easier. But if you got lines going all over the place, it's a lot more difficult later on. So activity D is dependent on C, straight line. I've got D, and my duration for D is 3. Now note that it says there's 2 days of lag, so I'm going to represent that with a +2 right there. And then E is dependent on B and D, so let me just get that one up here. Activity E, it's dependent on B and D, straight lines, right angles. The duration of E is 2. So if this is, I didn't use a ruler. It doesn't have to be a perfectly neat network diagram, but if it can be reasonably laid out off of a table, then these questions are a lot easier. So now you remember, you could do a full forward pass and backward pass, and I'll actually show you how that works. But I want you to look at the question really closely. So for example, the question might be, here is your table, and what is the duration of the critical path? Well, I could put a 1, and 1 + 6 is 7, -1 is 6, 1 over the divide. I could do that. Or I could say, well, how many paths do I have? Well, that's a path. That's a path. I've got 2 paths. And I could say 6 + 11, which is 17, plus 2, that's 19. I could say 6 + 7, that's 13, plus 2, 15, plus 3, 18, plus 2 is 20. What's the critical path? Well, the critical path is A, C, D, E, because that's a longer duration than the 19. Because remember, critical path is the sequence of activities that is the longest duration. And so that's what we got. So if the question was, what's the duration of the critical path, without doing the full forward pass and backward pass to calculate it, I know the duration is 20. Or if the question is, what is the path of the critical path, I could say A, C, D, E is the critical path. Okay? Now, let's say the question is, what is the float of activity C? Okay, I could do a full forward pass and backward pass because that would give me the float or slack. Or, since I know that's the critical path, I know the float's going to be 0 because anything on the critical path has a float of 0. So my point on this one is, if you draw a good network diagram and you pay attention to the question, you may not have to do that full forward pass and backward pass. How about this? If it says, what is the float of activity B? This feels a little more tricky because we know it's not on the critical path. So, well, what is the float? Well, this path here is floating against this path here. So what's the duration of this one? I've got 12 down here. I've got 11 up here. That 11 is floating against the 12. If it's a difference of 1, I'm telling you, the float's going to be 1 on that. So with some practice, that'll make a little bit more sense. But let's go ahead and do the full forward pass and backward pass on this one, all right? Just for practice. So in the way I teach it here, you're going to start with your early start of 1. And now what do? We take that 1 plus the 6, which is 7, subtract 1, goes back over there, goes to 6. Now, we have to account for if there's any lag, we have to account for that and go 1 more because we're going to need that 6. So we have to add 1. There's no lag here. So this goes to 7 and this goes to 7. Same thing. You add these together. So that'd be 18 minus 1 goes to 17. Add these together. That's 14 minus 1 goes to 13. Now here's kind of the tricky one. What you do is you take whatever the lag is, which is 2, and add yet another one. So I've got 13 plus 2 is 15 plus 1 is 16. Now that may seem a little bit confusing, but think of it this way. The earliest this is going to be finished is on day 13. It's going to be 2 days of lag, which means I cannot use 14 and 15. Those are gone. So what's the earliest this can start? Well, 16. So you take this one, add lag plus 1, that goes to 16. So let's take care of this one. 16 plus 3 is 19, minus 1 goes to 18. So there's no lag, so I don't have to add any lag. I've got 18 here, 17 here. This guy can't start until both of these are done, so I'm going to need that 18. Add 1, this goes to 19. 19 plus 2 is 21, minus 1 goes to 20. Guess what? We knew a couple minutes ago that the duration of the critical path would be 20. So you see all the time that I took to do that? If you can save that time in the exam, let's not have to do it. That's the forward pass. Let's do the backward pass. All right, you take the longest one, which would be the 20, drop that down here. And remember what we do? We take this minus the duration, so 20 minus 2, it's 18, plus 1 at the 19. Okay, that's cool. Now, the latest I can start that's 19, so what's the latest I can finish this? Well, it's going to be 18 because I need that 19, so 18 goes here. Let's go ahead and take care of this one. 18 minus 11, what do we have for that? Okay, so that would be 7 plus 1 goes to 8. And we've got the 18 minus the 3. Okay, so that'd be 15 plus 1 goes to 16. Here's kind of the tricky one, it feels. Like, well, how do we deal with that? The way you deal with this is you take the lag plus 1 and subtract it. Man, I think that's kind of confusing. But what you do is you take the lag, which is 2, add 1 to it, so that's 3, subtract it from here. So that's 13. Once again, another way to think about it is I need 16 right there. I can't use 15 or 14. So what's the latest this can be done is 13. So the formula is the lag plus 1 and subtract that. It's kind of an awkward way of saying it, but it's the proper math. All right, let's finish this thing out. 13 minus 7 is 6. Plus 1 goes to 7. So if the latest I can start this is 7, the latest I can start this is 8, what's the latest I can finish this? Well, it's going to be 6. I've got 6 minus 6 is 0. That goes to 1. It's always nice when that matches at the end. If it doesn't, you've got a problem. In fact, here's another trick. Notice there's nothing, this is not floating against anything. If it's not floating against anything, it has to be on the critical path. The only opportunity to not be on the critical path is if you have something to float against. And so the difference between these, if it's on its own, it has to be 0. So we got a float of 0 there. We've got the float 1, which we knew many minutes ago. The float here is 0, 0, 0. Remember, critical path is a series of tasks with no float. Okay? So if you can answer the question without doing all that, you're going to save yourself a couple minutes. But the key is to draw a good network diagram. So what I encourage you to do is to practice. Get a table, try to learn how to draw a network diagram based on that table, and then look at the question. And here's another question. It might say, activity F is added between B and before E, okay? So activity F is effectively added right here. And it's a duration of, let's say, 2. The question might be, does it add 2 days? Or how many days does it add? And the question might be none. So how many does it add? Well, we could go back and do a full forward pass and a backward pass. We can figure that out. Or we can say 6 plus 11 is 17 plus 2. That would be the 19 plus 2 is 21. Hey, guess what? The longest path used to be 20. Now we're at 21. It only added 1 day. Why? Because we had 1 day of float there. And so that one of those just got sucked in, and we just added 1 more. All right? So it's going to take some practice. And I tell you, in class, sometimes people are like, oh, I'm never going to get this. I'm telling you, with practice, these sorts of questions will be really, really easy. So take some time to learn how to go from a table and to draw a good network diagram, and then look at the question carefully. And when I took the exam, the question that had this, I had to answer it, and the very next question was based on the exact same table. And so you draw a good network diagram, you're going to get 2 questions answered. Okay? So learn how to do this. It's going to help you on exam day. Hey, this is Andy Kaufman of the People and Projects Podcast. Thank you so much for watching our video here. Hey, we've got some more that can help you learn how to lead and deliver right here. Just click on the video and check it out.